Okay, my name is SHIRLEY-MCNALL, Shug for short, born and raised here in Aztec, New Mexico, and we're in the Aztec Minium Park in the center of town. We just completed the toxic tour of hell. Today is August 21st, 2018, Tuesday. We just completed the toxic tour of hell, about 4 hours of driving through neighborhoods in our area, through Aztec and Bloomfield and a little of the countryside, to show what the people in this area deal with on a day-to-day basis in regard to oil and gas facilities in our neighborhoods. We've gone to school, McCoy School here in Aztec, and then we went down to 2 wells behind our Wendy's and our community bank in a neighborhood. Then we went to the park, Riverside Park, where the gas well has been filmed belching all kinds of emissions. Then we went toward Crouch Mesa area, which is a rural area in San Juan County, in a triangle, the triangle of Aztec, Farmington, and Bloomfield, where land was subdivided in the early 80s and people were living happily there until the developer sold some land that he had reserved to industry. Industry took over, the people, some of them just gave up, walked off. Their houses were repossessed, they lost their property because the land values went in the toilet when industry arrived. And we went over a Superfund site that's been sort of kind of remediated into a neighborhood where BP well complex is, that's trashy, close to homes. Then we went on into Bloomfield to look at oil and gas refineries, processing plants, into what's called the Blanco Hub, which is a major gas facility. It's a collection of pipelines where the gas is processed and sent in 36-inch lines to Arizona and California, sold. We came across one of the air quality monitors. There are 3 here in San Juan Basin, 1 here in Aztec, 1 at Navajo Lake, and 1 down in the Shiprock area that measures ozone and the precursors to ozone. We need the volatile organic compounds monitored, but the state says that's too expensive. We went to a basin disposal where produced water is dumped. It was so horrendous, the smell, the odor, and I participated in air quality testing in 2010 with global monitoring from California. And we found toxins in that area, in the air, that was above EPA standards. And then we stopped at an injection well site here within the city that was approved and built in the past 8 to 10 years, I'd say. The companies told our inexperienced community developer that was only going to be water injected, but it's toxic water. It's filled with chemicals and whatever with benzene and whatever comes up out of a gas well, whatever they pump out in their produced water. These injection wells, we don't know in this area if they're causing any earthquakes, but I do know in Oklahoma that the injection well systems are causing earthquakes. And we're ending the tour today back in our peaceful park in the center of Aztec, where the tranquility and the clean air is totally opposite than what some of us go through in our neighborhoods close to oil and gas facilities. I will say that all the oil and gas facilities are permitted by the state of New Mexico. Every facility that I showed today, oil and gas wells, refineries, disposal ponds, land farms, are all permitted by the state of New Mexico. I feel that a lot of the enforcement is running short, especially on emissions from land farms and disposal ponds. I know for a fact that a lot of the compounds that were detected in air quality samples from the disposal ponds were above EPA standards. The dirt farm that we went to today is supposed to be remediated soil. It's piling up, blowing in the wind as we saw today. It was blowing into the neighborhood and on us because they're supposed to water the piles down and properly remediate, but they don't have the water. And it's right across the road from subdivisions. What I believe we need for the safety and health and well-being of the people is to not have permits so close to homes and need setbacks, a mile or so away from homes. These things are dangerous. They're not healthy. I feel like I was born and raised here. I was around oil and gas my entire life, but we weren't overcome and overwhelmed by the sheer numbers of wells, 40,000 wells in San Juan Basin where I live, 25 gas wells within a mile radius of my home, 8 gas wells within a half mile of my home. 4 of them are hot for hydrogen sulfide, which is deadly. And the companies don't seem to understand that we are living creatures and we should not be collateral damage or the sacrificial lambs in this area that's called the National Sacrifice Area for the USA, as we're known by the EPA and in Washington, D.C. We shouldn't be sacrificial lambs for energy. My biggest concern about fossil fuel energy development is that it impacts our health. Without our health, we're not worth a damn. Health is wealth. And I urge areas that don't have oil and gas at this time to wake up. You might have it at some time and you need to get protections in place before the drilling starts. My name is Sugar McNall, Shug for short. We are in Aztec, New Mexico, which is my homeland. I was born and raised here. My family came here in the early 1900s. We raised cattle, raised on a cattle ranch. And the day job for most of the guys in my family has been in the oil and gas field. That's how we made our money. We are standing here today in front of a well, which is very close to McCoy Elementary School here in Aztec. 500 children plus staff in that school go to school here. My main concern with this particular well are the emissions that we have documented with FLIR camera, forward-looking infrared camera with Earthworks back in 2014. We did FLIR camera work on, and at the top of that tank is a vent. And the FLIR camera picked up clouds of emissions coming off that tank, floating over into the schoolyard, which if the kids were outside, they would be exposed to the toxic emissions. I have been here personally twice over the years and found major leaks and faulty equipment on this particular well. Teachers over the years have complained that they can smell the gas in their classrooms. Nothing has been done about that. This well still malfunctions every now and then. This well was drilled in 1982, many years after the school that was built in 1955. My major concern is this gas well is so close to the school, 400 feet from the school building, less than 100 feet from the playground where the kids play. We're still here in Aztec, New Mexico. 2 wells in this area that we're standing in. One, well, I don't know who owns them now. One was a BP and the other was ConocoPhillips. You will notice the 2 wells, we did FLIR tank footage on that tank back there, and it was rolling with emissions, looked like a smoke cloud. You'll notice how close this is to businesses and homes. And about a few years ago, my husband and my son-in-law smelled rotten egg smell, which normally means hydrogen sulfide. We called the OCD, Oil Conservation Division. These wells were tested. One of the wells tested positive for hydrogen sulfide and had 0 treatment on it. It was just boiling out in the air for exposure to the people. These 2 wells are only 2 of 150 gas wells in our little town, population about 6,000 people. The green box here is a house for the very, very loud compressor motors. You can still hear it, but it does kind of quiet it down a little bit. We have problems with light pollution, noise pollution, and the pollution from the gas. Here we are at our city park. Behind me is the fishing pond. Normally, kids would be fishing here, but this is a weekday, so they're in school. A lot of kids come down here. We have a lot of activities. It's one of our favorite places. Right across the street, we have a gas well. This is an old gas well. When we were here in 2014, I was here with Earthworks, and we did FLIR camera footage of the tank behind me. And out of that tank was a ginormous cloud of emissions that we filmed, and it was drifting right down across the path of some walkers that were walking along the ditch. This park's been here forever. It's just always, they used to use it for little fairs. We use it now for city events. The playground, the kids just love it here. But they're exposed at times to the toxic emissions that come out of that tank and probably other parts of this gas well. This is what's called a plug and abandon well right here next to apartments and homes here in Aztec. Plug and abandon well is when the well doesn't produce anymore or isn't economically good enough to produce anymore. And they take all the equipment off, pump in a certain required amount of cement, stick this pipe in, and put a little fence around it, and that's called a plug and abandon well. The information about the well is soldered on to the pipe here for future reference. There are thousands of these plug and abandon wells in this basin. They may or may not be a problem in the future. It's thought that the cement that plugs the holes will eventually deteriorate, and then there will be leaks. Aztec is a small part of the San Juan Basin, which is a gas field that encompasses southwestern Colorado and northwestern New Mexico. It's probably close to 5,000 square miles. In this basin, in the San Juan Basin, there are over 40,000 gas wells and oil wells that have been drilled so far. At this time, less than half of those are being produced. pumped. They're what we call shut in, which means they're turned off right now because of the low gas market, or they're just not economically feasible to manage at this time. 40,000 gas wells and oil wells. Oh, after the company leaves this plug and abandon well, as I said, there are worries by that have been voiced to us about the concrete that's dumped in there cracking over time, deteriorating. I even know of a gas well in Bloomfield near a school that was plugged with cedar posts driven in years ago. So this was an XTO Energy well, and this is the API number, kind of like a social security number on a well. Each one of them is assigned this number for identification. This well is probably 8 to 10 years old. It was drilled right in a man's hayfield and took up a vast amount of his hayfield. The hayfield was this whole area here, all the way over to that fence. We're standing here by two well locations adjacent to each other in San Juan County. You'll notice that quite a bit of land is taken up by this complex. If it's on private land, it's a loss to the landowner more than likely, because very few of us in this county own the mineral rights. They're usually owned by companies or the government, and the landowner loses the use of the land on the well locations, but he still has to pay taxes on it. I know that personally because I have a gas well on my property back in Aztec, and it takes up approximately 2 acres of my land. I own 9 acres of land, including the gas well, but I pay taxes on that property and I cannot use it. It's at the sole use of the gas company owner and the royalty and the mineral right owner. As you can see, these two gas well pads are surrounded by homes on all sides and livestock, probably children. Well, the livestock's exposed to the same thing that they breathe the same air. Livestock and wildlife breathe the same air that we do, so they're exposed to the same emissions from oil and gas wells that humans are. Two problems with San Juan County. We have 0 oil and gas ordinances, and we have 0 zoning, which means oil and gas facilities can be moved in your neighborhood because there are no regulations saying they can't. In San Juan County, a well can be, last time I checked with the fire marshal, they can drill 100 feet from your house. In Aztec, we have oil and gas ordinances, and they have to drill 400 feet from your house unless they can get a variance from the city of Aztec, and then that way they can move in as close as they want. We do have a little protection in Aztec, in the cities here in San Juan County, but the county is wide open. No ordinances, no rules. We're still in San Juan County. This well kind of indicates how close they can drill to your house. This is a pretty large facility here, and it's very close to these people's house. You'll see their children's toys in their backyard, and this thing stinks. I can smell some kind of emissions. I am picking up odor from the well, blowing in the wind. Have no idea what emissions we're smelling. And it's just right close. I'm sure the wind blows this smell into the yard where the little kids play. And my throat's starting to tighten a little, so we're not doing too good. I'm choking to death. We're out in San Juan County. In the early 80s, this area was subdivided. There are homes on several subdivisions up here. The developer retained some of the land and turned around and sold it to industry. And as you can see, it's a big industrial complex. A lot of these people have left. They just had to walk off and leave their land and their homes. Their homes were repossessed because their land lost value because of what happened here. It's a terrible injustice to the people of San Juan County, what's happened here. This is Hillcore, the company that came in and bought up ConocoPhillips and British Petroleum recently. Abandoned land farm that was built in the early 80s. And what a land farm does, it's supposed to remediate contaminated soil from tanks, contaminated soil off well pads or wherever a spill happened. This is a 60-acre land farm, if you can imagine that. This is all dirt that was too toxic to leave on site that has now been hauled into this neighborhood that we're driving into. This is permitted and approved by the state of New Mexico Oil and Gas Conservation Division. We're still out in San Juan County. This is a BP well site. I think there's 2 or 3 wells on it, and it just kind of shows you that without zoning of any kind with the county, that these things can be built, or people can move in their homes as close as they want to these facilities. This one says it's BP. It has a danger sign on it. It's dirty, it's messy, weeds, trash. Next time you see the BP sunflower, the pretty green one, I want you to think of this place. This is reality. Brought the film crew from Africa. 2 people. Mira broke down crying because she said this was the absolute worst she had seen, and she's been all over the world. And it just broke her heart to see the poverty and the condition of this well site and the little kids playing in their yards close to it. It's just unbelievable. We are now within the city of Bloomfield, New Mexico, where this is a gas processing plant, San Juan gas processing plant, right next to an old Catholic cemetery. I will say the cemetery was here first. This plant behind me emits, probably 100 tons of volatile organic compounds every year, and I'm probably wrong on those figures. This is probably the major source of our methane emissions. There's this processing plant and several more of them on this road. You can hear the noise. There's light pollution, noise pollution, plus their emissions. The little town of Bloomfield has probably, they claim a population of about 8,000, but that includes people that come in from the farms and the ranches and out in the boondocks to shop here in Bloomfield. But it does have a sizable population. There's an elementary school just west of here, Naba'ani School, with about 500 students in it. A few years ago, there was some kind of accident here at this plant. I believe it was this plant, and the school had to be evacuated. They did a pretty good job of evacuating, but they forgot 22 students in a portable building. and the kids were throwing up. They had sore throats. They had to take some of them to the doctor, to the hospital. It was a major nightmare. And the school is what we call downwind of this refinery. Hello. Nabaani School is at risk from all the emissions from numerous facilities on this road, which we'll probably film, because it's downwind and the emissions blow down that way. And just imagine thousands of tons of emissions from these facilities 24/7. They never turn off. The emissions from these refineries and gas processing plants on this road in the city of Bloomfield can be seen on earthworks, the FLIR camera footage. I don't remember the exact name of the site, but you can see the clouds of heavy emissions. And at night, the flare lights up the sky, makes a pink sky. They flare it off. And sometimes you can see the heat coming off the units. This is the Milagro plant owned by Williams, and if you look at their permit on the state permitting, their emissions are horrendous. I can't quote what they are right now, but they're bad. This is probably one of the biggest sources of methane in the county. We're coming up on a site called Basin Disposal within the city of Bloomfield. It's about 25 acres of, there's two big ponds here of what's called, we call it toxic soup. It is extremely dangerous here. As you can see, the hydrogen sulfide signs on the fences. Produced water is dumped here, and it is loaded with chemicals, benzene, hydrogen, and it builds up hydrogen sulfide. It's owned by former state representative Jerry Sandell. It was built in about the mid-80s. This whole area was subdivided. There were homes, people were starting to build homes, develop homes, and they were driven out by this site. It is managed by John Bokerding, who just happens to be on Susana Martinez's Environmental Improvement Board. Don't go in there. And it is within a neighborhood about 2 miles from the Nabaani School, and people have complained that they can smell these emissions from this pond when the wind's just right. State of New Mexico permits it. See if you can get that life preserver on the pole. If you fall in, you're saved.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh.
You gotta go.
This is an injection well site within the city of Aztec, where produced water from the gas wells is hauled in and injected at very high pressure into the ground, probably a mile into the ground, into wells. It's a place to store contaminated water from the well sites. They bring it in big trucks, and As I said, it's injected at very high pressure. You either do this or put it in the ponds at basin disposal like we just had. And this is the quakes, causes quakes. In Oklahoma, these injection wells are causing earthquakes. And probably in other states too. It hasn't been researched. This facility was approved by our City of Aztec planner, and the company told her not to worry, it was just water that they were going to inject in the ground. They didn't tell her that it was contaminated. And so she approved it on her own, but she didn't know what she was doing. Uninformed.